Okay, so imagine this. You're in Minnesota, and the state government is just frozen in place.
It's true.
Why? Because the two political parties are in this, like, epic battle for control the House of Representatives.
And it's not some kind of historical drama we're talking about.
No.
This literally just happened last month.
I know, it's crazy, right?
It is.
So after the 2024 election, the Minnesota House was split, basically, right down the middle.
Yeah, the Republicans ended up with this tiny little majority, like the tiniest you can imagine, just one seat.
One seat, that's it.
Yeah.
Talk about a nail-biter.
Oh, absolutely.
And to make things even crazier, two of those races were so close they ended up in court.
Oh, yeah, adding even more fuel to the fire.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So those contested elections, they really became the catalyst for something you rarely see in American politics.
What's that?
A full-on boycott.
Whoa.
The Democrats, they were facing a 67 to 66 deficit in the House.
Yeah.
And they decided, you know what? We're drawing a line in the sand.
So they just refused to participate.
Yeah, they basically refused to show up for the legislative session, which meant the House couldn't reach what they called a quorum.
Oh, right. A quorum, that's the minimum number of members you need present to actually do any official business.
Exactly.
So without a quorum, it's like the whole House is paralyzed.
Completely, no laws can be passed, no budgets approved, nothing.
So that's what happened in Minnesota.
Yep. For weeks, the state government was just stuck in this weird limbo.
And can you imagine the uncertainty? Like, how frustrating would that be?
Oh, I'm sure people were pulling their hair out.
I bet.
All because of this battle for control of the House.
Okay, so we've got this high-stakes showdown, Democrats versus Republicans, with the future of Minnesota hanging in the balance.
Pretty much.
But before we get into, like, all the crazy details of how this all unfolded, we should probably take a step back
Yeah, good idea.
and try to understand why the Democrats decided to go with this boycott thing.
It was a bold move for sure. A lot of people probably just saw it as them being obstructionist, trying to like throw a wrench in the gears of government just to cause chaos.
Right.
But you have to remember the context here, you know.
Yeah, what were they so worried about?
Well, they were facing a Republican majority with a history of pushing policies that Democrats really didn't like.
Like, what kind of policies?
Oh, you know, things like voter ID laws, cuts to social programs, maybe even rolling back environmental protections.
Okay, yeah, I see their concern.
And with control of the House hanging by a thread, like literally one seat.
Yeah.
Democrats felt like they had to do something drastic.
So this boycott, it was like their way of protecting their interests.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They wanted to force the Republicans to compromise, to come to the negotiating table and prevent what they saw as really harmful legislation from being enacted.
So they were taking a big risk.
Oh, a huge gamble.
They were betting that the pressure of a stalled government, all the headlines, the public outcry would force the Republicans to give them something.
It was a high-stakes game of chicken.
For sure. And did it work?
Well, as the standoff dragged on, the pressure definitely mounted.
Yeah, I bet.
Newspapers were running daily stories about the government shutdown.
Right.
Businesses started getting worried about the economic impact, and you can bet people were calling their representatives demanding that they fix it.
So it was like a pressure cooker. The Democrats turned up the heat.
That's a good way to put it.
And eventually the Republicans had to find a way out.
Exactly. And that's where the idea of a power-sharing agreement came in.
Power sharing.
Yeah, now this kind of arrangement isn't exactly common in American politics.
Right. We usually have that winner-take-all system.
Exactly. Whoever gets the majority gets to call all the shots.
But not this time.
Nope. In this case, in Minnesota, it was the only way forward.
Wow. So both sides had to swallow their pride and make some concessions.
They did. They had to compromise to get the government moving again.
And this wasn't just like a vague promise to play nice, right?
Oh, no, this was a detailed plan, a real roadmap for how they would share power and govern the state, even though they had these huge ideological differences.
It was like they hit the reset button on Minnesota's government.
Yeah, really was.
But before we dive into the specifics of this deal, let's take a minute to meet the main players in this whole drama.
Okay, that was good.
On the Democratic side, we have Melissa Hortman, the outgoing Speaker of the House.
She's a tough cookie.
She'd been in charge for 6 years. Giving up that power couldn't have been easy.
Definitely not.
And then on the Republican side, we have Lisa DeMuth, who was in line to become the new speaker.
And her story is pretty amazing.
What's so special about her?
Well, if she became speaker, she'd be the first black person and the first Republican woman to hold that position in Minnesota's history.
Whoa, that's huge.
It is. So this power-sharing agreement didn't just resolve a political crisis. It also ushered in a new era of representation in Minnesota's government.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that even amidst all the chaos and gridlock, sometimes progress can emerge in unexpected ways.
So we have these two strong leaders representing very different visions for the future of Minnesota,
Yep.
and they're forced to find a way to work together.
It's like a political thriller meets a buddy cop movie.
Right. It's like you've got these two rivals and they have to put their differences aside and make it work.
Exactly. And that's exactly what happened on February 5th, 2025, when the power sharing agreement was finally reached.
Okay, so tell me about this deal. Was it just like a handshake agreement, or was it more formal than that?
Oh, no. This was the real deal. A complex, detailed document that spelled out all the ground rules for how the House would function going forward.
Okay, so walk me through some of the key parts of the agreement.
All right. So first and foremost, it paved the way for Lisa DeMuth to become the new Speaker of the House.
Right.
But it also included some important concessions to the Democrats.
Like what?
Well, for one, there was a provision for co-chairing committees if the House became evenly divided after the special election they had coming up.
Oh, right. That special election for that one vacant seat?
Exactly. That election had the potential to totally change everything.
How so?
Well, if the Democrats won that seat, they'd have the same number of members as the Republicans, triggering the co-chairing provision.
And giving them way more influence, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So even though the Republicans were technically in control, the Democrats had a real shot at regaining some of their lost power.
Okay, so that's one key part of the agreement. What else?
Well, another big one was the supermajority requirement to pass any bill.
Supermajority, meaning they needed more than a simple majority.
Yeah, they needed 68 votes to pass anything.
Wow, so even with their slim majority, the Republicans couldn't just push through whatever they wanted.
Nope, they needed at least some Democrats to vote with them.
That's a huge win for the Democrats.
It basically gave them veto power over anything they really opposed.
So it's this fascinating situation. The Republicans are in charge, but the Democrats have a lot of leverage.
Yeah, a lot of power to block things they don't like.
And on top of all that, they added this whole new House committee focused on fraud and agency oversight.
Yeah, that would raise some eyebrows.
It seems like that could be a way for the Republicans to go after the Democratic governor.
It definitely had that potential. It added a layer of partisan tension to what was otherwise a surprisingly bipartisan agreement.
Okay, so let me get this straight. We have this historic power-sharing agreement, a special election that could flip everything on its head, and a new committee that could spark even more political battles.
You got it. And this is just the tip of the iceberg.
There's more.
Oh, yeah. We haven't even gotten into the long-term implications of this whole showdown.
Yeah.
The lessons it holds for the future of Minnesota, or what it might teach us about the state of our democracy.
Sounds like we have a lot more to unpack. Stay tuned, folks, because we're about to dive deeper into the motivations, the strategies, and the lasting impact of this unprecedented political drama in Minnesota. Okay, so we've got this power-sharing agreement. It's like a truce between the Democrats and Republicans.
A fragile truce.
Yeah, exactly. But this is politics we're talking about.
Right.
Not exactly known for being all sunshine and rainbows.
Definitely not.
I'm sure there were moments when this whole thing almost fell apart, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the agreement might have set the stage for more collaboration, but it didn't magically erase all those deep differences between the two parties.
Yeah, like that fraud oversight committee that seemed like a recipe for disaster.
It did. And remember, it had a Republican majority.
Right.
And they didn't waste any time using that power to start investigating different state agencies.
What were they looking for?
Well, they were basically accusing the Walz administration of all sorts of things, mismanagement, wrongdoing, you name it.
So it's like even though they had this agreement, there was still a lot of suspicion and maneuvering for political advantage.
It was almost like a paradox.
Yeah.
They had to work together, but they were also trying to undermine each other at the same time.
It's like a game of 4D chess.
That's a great analogy.
They're trying to anticipate each other's moves and stay one step ahead.
And the stakes were incredibly high. I mean, the results of those investigations could damage the governor's reputation, influence future elections, even impact policy.
So it wasn't just about who controls the committees or what bills get passed.
No, it was about shaping the narrative, controlling how people saw things, setting the stage for future political battles.
But it wasn't all doom and gloom.
No, not at all. I mean, the agreement did lead to some genuine moments of collaboration and compromise.
I'm glad to hear that.
Like that supermajority requirement we talked about, remember?
Yeah.
That turned out to be a game changer. It forced lawmakers to actually work across the aisle, find common ground, build consensus.
They couldn't just ram things through anymore.
No, they actually had to persuade members of the other party to support their bills.
That must have changed the types of policies they were even considering.
Oh, absolutely. They had to focus on things that had at least some bipartisan support.
Instead of just pushing partisan wish list items.
Exactly. And, we saw this play out in a few different ways. For example, the legislature passed a 2-year budget on time, which is a pretty big deal considering all the partisan fighting that had been going on.
Yeah, that's a big win.
They also tackled a number of other important issues: education funding, transportation infrastructure, even some criminal justice reform.
Okay, so there were some real successes, some signs that this power-sharing thing could actually work.
There were.
But I'm curious, how did the public react to all of this?
Well, as you might expect, public opinion was kind of split.
Makes sense.
Some people were really happy that the lawmakers had found a way to break the gridlock and actually get things done.
They saw it as a victory for compromise.
Exactly, a sign that maybe our political system isn't totally broken after all.
A little glimmer of hope.
Right, but on the other hand, there were plenty of people who were still skeptical.
What were their concerns?
They argued that the agreement was just a temporary fix, a Band-Aid on a much deeper wound.
They didn't think it would last.
No. They pointed to all the ongoing partisan battles, the investigations, the constant power struggles as evidence that the system was still fundamentally flawed.
And you know what? They might have had a point, because remember, looming over all of this was that special election.
Oh, yeah, the one that could completely change the balance of power.
The one that could make this whole power-sharing agreement obsolete.
Exactly. That special election was like a ticking time bomb, and the outcome could reshape the entire political landscape in Minnesota.
Okay, so remember that special election for that vacant seat, the one that could change everything?
Oh, yeah.
What happened?
Well, it took place on March 11th.
Right.
And guess what?
The Democrats won.
They won that crucial seat,
How?
bringing the House to an even split: 67 Democrats, 67 Republicans.
Talk about a turning point.
It was huge.
So that means the co-chairing provision of the agreement kicked in, right?
Exactly. Democrats now had equal control of the committees.
So they had a lot more say in what legislation even got considered.
Oh, yeah. They had a lot more influence over the whole process.
It's amazing how one election for one seat could have such a massive impact.
It really is. It shows you how important every single vote can be, especially in those close races.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in our democracy, even if it doesn't always feel like it.
Absolutely. Your vote matters.
So how did the Republicans react to this shift in power?
Well, they weren't exactly thrilled.
I bet.
They'd gone from having control to having to share it more than they'd planned.
I'm sure there were some tense negotiations.
Oh, there was some behind-the-scenes maneuvering, for sure. But you know what?
What?
Both sides managed to avoid a complete meltdown.
So they were able to make it work.
They did. They kept working within the framework of that power-sharing agreement, even if it wasn't always easy.
But what about the big picture? Did this whole experiment in power sharing actually change anything in Minnesota politics?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's probably too early to say for sure.
I know it's only been a few months.
Right. But I do think this experience left its mark.
How so?
Well, for one thing, it forced lawmakers to actually talk to each other, to break out of their partisan bubbles.
Yeah, they couldn't just ignore the other side anymore.
Exactly. They had to find common ground, build relationships, figure out how to work together, even when they disagreed on big issues.
So they had to rediscover the art of compromise.
Exactly. And I think that's something we need more of in American politics.
Totally. And, I wonder if this had an impact on the voters, too.
What do you mean?
Well, after seeing their elected officials actually working together, maybe they started to expect more of that kind of behavior.
You're right. Maybe it shifted the political culture in Minnesota, at least a little bit.
It would be amazing if Minnesota, with its history of pragmatism and its willingness to try new things, could be a model for the rest of the country.
Yeah, a model for how to bridge the partisan divide and get things done.
It's a nice thought.
It is.
Well, this whole deep dive into the Minnesota House power struggle has been quite a journey. We've had dramatic elections, boycotts, a historic power-sharing agreement, a special election that changed everything.
It's been a real roller coaster.
It has, and I think it leaves us with more questions than answers.
Like what?
Well, can this power-sharing model work in other states or even at the federal level?
Good question.
And will the lessons learned in Minnesota have a lasting impact on our political culture?
I guess time will tell.
It will, but I think this whole story reminds us that even in a system that can feel very broken and very divided, there's still hope.
Hopes for compromise?
Hope for progress, and most importantly, hope for a better future.
Well said. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep believing in the possibility of a more effective and collaborative government for all of us.